Just a quick note, we may have investments in some projects discussed on this podcast. However, nothing we say should be taken as financial advice or a recommendation to buy or sell any asset. Please always remember to do your own research and never take our discussions as a recommendation to buy or sell any asset. Thanks for tuning in and on to the show. Welcome to the Fren Zone presented by TokenSoft. Today I'm here with Matt and Amine from Arch Network. Arch Network makes it easy to deploy interoperable smart contract-like programs without fracturing liquidity or taking on bridge risk. Matt and Amine, it's a pleasure to have you on here today.
Thanks for having us.
So in your own words, what is Arch Network?
So Arch, from a very high level, is an execution platform, right? Bitcoin is lacking programmability. It's never been Turing complete. It's got very limiting scripting language. And of course, it doesn't have its own VM. So all of these dynamics really create a dilemma for developers who are trying to tap into the native liquidity and distribution on Bitcoin, but don't really have the tools necessary to build programmable applications like we've become familiar with in DeFi, like on Ethereum and Solana. So what Arch Network did is we went ahead and built these key infrastructural elements, a VM for Bitcoin, a proof of stake consensus that allows us to do more of these more Turing complete and native things, but more importantly, fast on Bitcoin, which we know is quite slow. So all the friction that has been encountered from a developer perspective, as well as a DeFi user's perspective, we've addressed and tried to create a monolithic ecosystem that can build more programmable applications on Bitcoin.
And how did you guys get into the crypto space? What brought you to the point that you're at today?
So it's been a long ride for both of us, I'd say. Like myself, dating back to 2012, 2013-ish, I was mining Bitcoin in my college dorm room. Actually, I had laptops plugged into pretty much every outlet, taking advantage of the free electricity. And at the time, I didn't really know what was going to happen with crypto. I just had a couple of friends. Some told me it was going to be worth $100,000 someday, and sitting at under $1, it was quite interesting to learn a bit about it. And then I had other friends who were buying recreational stuff on the Silk Road with Bitcoin. So like I got to see both sides of the coin here, of like as an investor, as an actual useful, non-sensual form of money or digital currency. So that's kind of what got me into Bitcoin initially. And over the years, of course, there wasn't a lot to do until maybe 2016, 2017, when the ICO boom took shape, and that was certainly a lot of fun. So participated as an investor, and, speculator in that whole cycle. And then, of course, not until 2020 again, when it finally came back in DeFi summer and NFTs and all that. So I've been a part of most crypto cycles, but it was really exciting to see the evolution of the design space opening up on Bitcoin with the emergence of ordinals back in 2023, and it became very, very popular. So I saw that as an awesome opportunity to actually start a business in crypto, whereas been more of a passive investor or collector over the years, channeling my experience as an entrepreneur, but also my history and passion for crypto.
As for me, I don't have such a cool story as Matt. I just came across the Bitcoin white paper on a forum. I was like pretty interested in like distributed systems and how you could like program these like local rules on nodes and have like these distributed effects. And that always like piqued my interest. So I kept with the crypto space pretty early on. When Ethereum white paper came out, this was like really intriguing for me. Now I could program blockchain. So I delved a little bit into that, made a couple contracts here and there. And then when Solana came out as well, that was like a big moment. Now you could do like really performant apps. I knew exactly that Solana would like outperform in terms of speed, mainly because it used some of the software engineering techniques that we used to use at banks. But yeah, I did go to college, majored in artificial intelligence, and worked for a couple of big Moroccan banks. Re-engineered their data pipeline for processing checks, with computer vision, and made them a lot of money, made them fire a couple of people here and there. But yeah.
You talked a little bit through the genesis of Arch Network and why it exists, and it's interesting. It's a lot of the parallels for like why we Ethereum sort of came about, but at the same time, I think Ethereum has a very different culture than Bitcoin. Talk to us a little bit about the architecture of Arch Network. How does it link into Bitcoin, et cetera? And what are some of the values you're trying to carry forward for people building on Arch?
Yeah, so if you really like think about smart contracts, they're mainly a couple of things you need to be aware about. It's mainly like state changes, and you need the state change function. So after ordinals came out like a year or so ago, ordinals like introduced the capability to store data on Bitcoin. So the only missing piece was the state change function. And that is what we introduced with Arch. We wanted to make a VM on top of Bitcoin that basically enable these programmable types of applications and enable DeFi directly on Bitcoin, and trying to like not compromise with like security for users. So what we have is basically a proof of stake system where that is governed by a thresholded multisig, where each validator holds a key. For our thresholded multisig, we use PROS, which is a threshold sign-in scheme, where you only need a subset of participants on the network to basically able to produce a valid signature. PROS does have some inefficiencies. It was designed for efficiency over robustness, and you need that guarantees if you're running a proof of stake system. So we introduced on top of it ROS, which is basically a communication protocol that launches parallel sign-in sessions and give us those guarantees around robustness. So each validator basically holds a key, and these keys basically play into the consensus. The keys are distributed based on stake, based on like how much each validator has in delegated stake. So basically a proof of stake system on top of proof of work. And yeah, we have like a VM that plays natively with Bitcoin and how UTXOs work. We have a hybrid model. We have a hybrid account model that you can basically use the account model and still make it anchored to Bitcoin UTXO. So that abstracts a lot of complexities for developers.
So what's the function of the decentralized proof of stake verifier network that powers Arch's ecosystem?
So the validator network is used obviously to secure the network. People, in order to join, they need to stake their Arch tokens in order to participate into the set. You get a node, you get a key, you get a number of keys proportional to your stake, uh, to the stake distribution, and you get to secure the network, earn fees from doing that, either from emissions or transaction fees. The keys are also used to basically participate into the thresholded signature scheme that is used to basically provide this type of programmable wallets to programs.
Yeah, since we're actually a traditional proof of stake network, an honest majority proof of stake network similar to Solana, we need validators, credible ones at that, because before we can open source the node software, make it permissionless, and make sure that the network is secure and stable, we need actual bona fide credible validators, which we're actually very lucky and blessed to have some of the best commercial validators in the crypto ecosystem, mostly from the Solana ecosystem and chain agnostic as well. So guys like Galaxy, Luganodes, Blockdaemon, Chorus One, Juicy Stake, and Ajvana, Helios. These are more Solana aligned validators naturally, but we've got a group of about 30 top tier validators who are all committed to supporting our network on day one. And over time, we'll open source that, like I said, and make it more permissionless so that we can scale the network far beyond 30 nodes and make it more decentralized over time.
It's really incredible. I kind of like the political juxtaposition of like, you guys are at the intersection of Bitcoin and Solana. So it's like you have the security and integrity of Bitcoin, and then you have the performance of Solana on the other side. I kind of really like that. And what are some of the use cases that what stage is Arch Network at right now, and what are some of the use cases that are either there now or you're looking to see on Arch Network?
So right now we're in our testnet period at the moment. We've been in testnet since about October, and right now we've been really just focused on helping teams get over the line in their deployment. Naturally, since we're not an EVM or not even an SVM forked chain or copy pasted chain, essentially a roll up, there's a little bit of friction when it comes to learning how to deploy a smart contract or a program on Arch. Just like there was a little bit of a chewing glass phase in the early days of Solana where they had to learn how to utilize this parallelization and independent state and some of these memory constraint limits that weren't the same as building on Ethereum. We're dealing with a lot of that same challenges right now. So there's a lot of handholding, a lot of concentrated support on the key primitives that we want to see in this, we'll call it the first cohort of builders that's really going to take shape or posture up this ecosystem. So we've got some really quality builders, a lot from the Solana ecosystem. Naturally, since we're a Rust-based VM, we are an independent and parallel type of execution environment, very similar to the Solana stack. So when it comes to modifying programs or trying to get up to speed on the Arch network, it's the Solana developers who are getting there faster than the EVM builders or front end builders. But of course, just like with Solana, as more open source guides and more resources become available, like CLIs and SDKs, and we'll have our own Anchor comparable open source framework that abstracts away a lot of the complexities of Rust. As that stuff comes to become available for developers, that gap gets shortened pretty quickly.
Talk to us a little bit about the VM and what language the contracts are written in, et cetera.
So the VM we actually used the same repo that the SVM was built on top of, called RBPF. It's Berkeley packet filters. They were mainly used for like networking stuff on like Google and Facebook, pretty performance stuff. But yeah, we use we use the account model. It's parallel, so you can feed multiple accounts into the contracts, and transactions are processed in parallel for non-independent state. It's written in Rust. If you know Rust, you can pretty much just get started. You just need to get your head around the UTXO model and how it plays into our hybrid account model.
Interesting. So it's contracts are written in Rust, and then what's the key model like?
So we use Schnorr signatures. We use the same curve that Bitcoin uses.
Interesting.
Mainly to make it easy for people who already have Bitcoin to get started on Arch.
That's another key advantage, right? Is because now we don't need any specialized wallets for any user to participate. They can use whichever Bitcoin wallet they actually prefer to use or they use already. So there's not an added layer of friction when it comes to allowing users to participate with whichever application that's built on top of our.
So because it's UTXO based also, how are you guys enabling more complex contracts? Did you guys expand the script, basically the script language?
No, so the accounts basically have a UTXO field. We call it the anchor. So whenever a state change happens on that specific account, uh, a state transition on Bitcoin happens as well, where that UTXO is spent on Bitcoin. So there is like stay on Arch that's changing, and there is also a UTXO that's being spent on the Bitcoin network. And we have a rollback mechanism basically to keep both in sync. As you know, the Bitcoin consensus model is probabilistic. You don't have some of the guarantees that you may want, but we do offer them through this like rollback mechanism. So you can have guarantees that the state transitions on Arch and the asset transfers that are happening on Bitcoin are atomic.
And that's how we're able to be so fast at the base layer, because we can give applications soft confirmation of execution so they can proceed as if it is going to be confirmed without having to wait for Bitcoin to actually confirm it.
I like how you're thinking about that, because usually it's like 0, 1, confirmation 3, 4, 5, 6. But like when you're looking at that, you kind of don't know how to model the risk or think about the risk. And so, a lot of exchanges just have different numbers of confirmations that they tack onto. So that's kind of interesting that you thought about it that way. And so what is like the first main use case that you guys are sort of launching with?
Yeah, so the first use case was Saturn. It's basically a Bitcoin DEX on the L1. You don't have to bridge. You don't have, for users, you don't have to take any additional trust assumptions. Saturn basically like leveraged Arch to the max and showed what is possible. It's already on testnet live right now. Like people before Saturn, people were not concerned with like trying to make Bitcoin fast. Like at least try to make the user experience feel fast. They were just like thinking about like we'll just give you like one confirmation and that's all. And for a DEX, that's not how things work out, because you have this like state contention. You're basically changing the curve of the DEX is basically one state and one UTXO, and a lot of people need to be able to change it intra Bitcoin blocks to be able to have like efficient markets. So what Saturn did is like we basically worked with them to get some real-time mempool indexing to get the data from the Bitcoin mempool to the ArchVM as soon as possible. And they also like leveraged the anchoring to give the guarantees around state transitions on Arch and UTXO transfers on Bitcoin being atomic. So the way it works, you're basically sending a PSBT saying, I want to basically sell this amount of runes for some Bitcoin to this to like anyone who wants to take the other parts of the trade. The UTXO is then sent as input to the smart contracts, and smart contracts holds all the UTXOs in their control in the state and basically fills in the other parts of the trade. And that enables us to give like trustless user experience on Bitcoin L1. The PSBT is basically enforced by Bitcoin nodes and Bitcoin miners.
Interesting. So it's like Bitcoin is all the way underneath, but then it's structured so Bitcoin's sort of at the application layer too. So you're basically making Bitcoin composable.
Yeah, like if you think about it, Bitcoin is entirely peer-to-peer, right? It's exists to have just like one party, two party, and that is not conducive for like pool-based DeFi. So in the eyes of Bitcoin, it is still very much two parties. There are two parties that are signing both sides of this PSBT, a partially signed Bitcoin transaction. When the swapper in a DEX clicks like I want to swap this button and then a Bitcoin transaction pops up, they're hitting an RPC endpoint for within Arch, which then constructs the Bitcoin transaction on their behalf. They're signing one half. It goes to the network. The network signs the other half, assuming that it's a valid transaction after consensus is reached. So now in the eyes of Bitcoin, you still have a two-party contract, but in terms of DeFi, the network was able to support more pool-based DeFi where liquidity providers can LP into an AMM and get yield for it without having to actually be present to sign the other side of that transaction. The Arch network signs the other half. So from the taker's perspective, which is the majority of the volume in a DEX, all they're trusting is Bitcoin is going to enforce the rules of that PSBT. They don't have to trust Arch. They don't have to trust anybody but Bitcoin. Of course, LPs who deposit funds into the pool, they make limited trust assumptions on the Arch validator network, but the takers of that liquidity don't, which is incredibly unique in Bitcoin, where all participants are forced to bridge into the network first before they can actually participate in a swap.
Tell me if I'm thinking about this correctly. So for the Arch network to do things with the UTXOs between different users, those UTXOs still have to come into Arch network first, right?
Yeah, that's not necessarily true, but in some cases, yeah. So in like the DEX example, there are like two sides, makers and takers. The makers need to deposit their funds into the Arch network multisig that's basically governed by the proof of stake consensus. But the takers don't. They can just like send a PSBT to the network, and the program will like fill the other parts of the trade. from their like PDA program derived address, and basically fill in the other part of the trade, and then like send it to the Bitcoin network where the trade actually happens.
Is it possible to revoke those UTXOs?
You mean like take them out of the multisig, you mean? Yeah, as a liquidity provider, you can unstake or like pull your assets out of the multisig. It's no different than when you're LPing in like a Uniswap pool, right? Like as an LP, you are still trusting the ETH validator set, right, to like govern the rules of the smart contracts. So you could think of the Arch multisig as a programmable smart contract controlled wallet that just governs the rules of whichever program of the DEX, right? And they'll sign the other side of the trade.
Okay, I think that's a great way to put it. It's sort of a programmable wallet that wraps the Bitcoin you have.
Yep.
And then can you talk to us a little bit about what are some other use cases that you think would be interesting on Arch? So, DEX and Bitcoin trading is, it's an obvious first step, but what are some other cool things that can happen that, aren't possible on Bitcoin today?
Well, I think that there's like, first and foremost, what's most exciting is creating this Bitcoin denominated on-chain economy, which is, of course, going to be very familiar with other ecosystems like Ethereum, Solana, and all these other alt-VMs as well. So like the primitives, DEX, order book, borrowlend, perps, all those stuffs, they play a pretty crucial element or role in the ecosystem. But if you go over on Ethereum, there's not really any true yield for Bitcoin on Ethereum. If you go to Aave, it's like 0.2% APY. And the reason for that is there's no demand for Bitcoin in this ecosystem. It's only used as just like a reserve asset to borrow against. But Ethereum yield is much higher in Ethereum, and the stablecoin, of course, even higher, because it plays a crucial role in this leverage and looping of DeFi. So our first order of business is constructing and posturing up all of the DeFi primitives that are going to be a hub for liquidity to find true yield that stems from the DeFi economy that we're standing up. After that, there's a lot more exotic stuff that people are working on, which we're really excited about, like Forex and perps trading on actual tokenized RWA. So we can actually do like on-chain perps trading for securities and commodities and stuff like that in Forex, which I think Bitcoin makes a lot of sense for, because naturally people want to hold Bitcoin more than they want to hold Ethereum and Solana. Other really cool, interesting ways of making Bitcoin play in that type of ways is like in the Web 2 worlds, you have a multi-trillion-dollar business called factoring that is used for cash flow management with businesses, manufacturing, transportation, all different kinds of businesses. They ultimately need to borrow just to like make sure that they can manufacture their next round of materials, because their receivables are on like net 30 or 60-day terms. So this is a really good use case for convincing Web 2 businesses to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet, because number one, they're being told to do this in the media right now. Like you see GameStop is going to start buying like $1 billion worth of Bitcoin or whatever. Like you're going to start to see this domino effect of companies and corporations and countries included that want to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet as a hedge against inflation. But now you can actually get some utility off of that balance sheet by borrowing against your Bitcoin for the purpose of cash flow management. So we've got some deals with some factoring companies and other RWA asset issuers that will be utilizing Bitcoin for liquidity management, stuff like that, which is actually very interesting.
Interesting. So you think you're going to start seeing institutional use cases that are built here?
Absolutely.
And talk to us a little bit about, it sounds like your VM is kind of unique. It's the contracts are in Rust. Why did you select Rust for this chain?
Rust does provide you a lot of benefits with like memory management, making sure you're not leaking memory. I think that's a perfect fit for like smart contract development. And also we want it to be like as similar to like Solana as possible, mainly because of their parallel model for accounts. I think that fits really nicely with the Bitcoin UTXO model, because Bitcoin UTXOs are also processed in parallel. There's only like one UTXO that you can spend in one transaction. So you have this like nice fit between like the account model and the UTXO model.
And I guess the parallelization can hold its integrity because all these UTXOs go through Bitcoin eventually. And so Bitcoin would just reject any non-compliant parallel transfers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. What was it like? How did you guys come up with this architecture? It's pretty unique and interesting. And how did the early ideation go for this?
That was all Amine. I'll give him all the credit. So go ahead.
So me and Matt joined this startup accelerator called Bitcoin Startup Lab, and I joined with this idea of like making the alchemy for Bitcoin, basically like just indexing software, making it easier for developers to create like to like just interact with the chain. But we started like doing a couple of like customer interviews, like just feeling what are the pains that developers face. And we just noticed that there is like this big pain from developers with just like being able to express themselves. Like a lot of people are coming from the EVM or like the Solana world and they don't think about this stuff. Building on Bitcoin is just like so hard because you can't really express yourself with some programmability. So and we also felt that like all the Bitcoin L2s right now were out there, just like bridge first and then think about programmability. And that just sounds janky. We wanna like bring Bitcoin DeFi to Bitcoin, not another like Bitcoin L2. So yeah, that is how we initially like stumbled over the idea, and we just like hacked around the prototype and for a way for how it could be done on Bitcoin L1, and that's what we came up with Arch.
I was going to say, just like add to it a little bit. So like when we were in the Bitcoin Startup Lab together, we did notice that there were pretty much two camps. You had people that were hacking around the layer one, using things like DLCs, discrete log contracts, which are incredibly limited in what you could actually do with them. And then you had all of these just EVM L2s and stacks, right? Like EVM was just some copy paste of optimism with a bridge or something like that. And that was pretty much it. And one thing I'll say about Amine is he's an incredibly accomplished, like low-level system design expert. Like he reads white papers for fun, he reads proposals for fun, and when he does, he just intimately understands all of the design and trade-offs that were made from the founders without even needing to like have it explained to him. It just makes sense. So I think that there was this realization, mostly on Amine's part, not even on myself. I can't take credit for this. Is like everybody is wrapped up in the way that Ethereum does things in this modular approach, and they were making certain assumptions there. And he was just like, no, there's definitely another way to do this. And he just like designed it. There was an app called they are called Liquidium. They're like the Aave or the borrow and lending application for ordinals and runes on Bitcoin. And they came to us and they said, look, we're using DLCs and we have this challenge because we cannot do pools. Like you can't do Aave without pools. Doing a peer-to-peer borrow and lending marketplace is incredibly limited. And that's what they were stuck with using DLC. So they wanted us to come up with a solution to do more pool-based lending. So we got to work on this design. And it really hasn't changed from day one. I think Amine was like laser focused on this specific implementation. And when we pitched it to Multicoin and some of our other investors early on, like Portal, they like it immediately made sense. Kyle Samani said, this is the coolest thing I've seen so far on Bitcoin. And we knew we were onto something. So we just kept on going forward, making sure that we built some like cool prototypes for the applications that were experiencing these problems firsthand. And it made sense to them. And now here we are like almost 2 years later. And we're ready to go to mainnet in about a month and a half. So I think it's a pretty exciting time.
Is it Kyle that made you use the SVM?
No, I think we got on his radar because it was the SVM. I think our pre-seed investors portal, who did a great job at making introductions for us, they saw a post from Kyle that said like, who's doing SVM on Bitcoin kind of thing. And she just, said, hey, these guys have something interesting. You should look at it. We did a couple of calls. They asked a bunch of questions, and then they came to the conclusion that this is a pretty cool and very different, way of doing things.
Amazing. Kyle is a good bottom up thinker. He always looks at it,
Definitely some of the smartest investors that we've had the pleasure of working with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of investors that invest for the hype or the trend. And it's like, if you're doing that, you're already late. You have to like know how things work, have a little bit of a vision for where things are going, and hopefully be right, part
we
of the time
we
at
we
least.
take a lot of the same, sort of psyche when it comes to building our ecosystem. Like we're not trying to go after 85 applications. Like we're trying to appeal to the developers that are going to skate to where the puck is going. They recognize what they're going to be able to achieve with this technology and really tap into it, as opposed to going for the path of least resistance or the easiest implementation available. If that's what you're looking for, we are not it. It's going to be a challenge and a grind to get your application built. But the cross to bear for you as an application is not the same as what these EVM L2 apps are going to face. Their challenge is going to be getting liquidity to arrive on their chain because that's their market. We have, a much better advantage when it comes to tapping into the native liquidity on Bitcoin. So that's kind of a different trade-off there if
Yes.
you're an application builder.
And I think we've seen a lot of L2s crop up, and it hasn't stopped, right? It went from Ethereum L2s to Bitcoin L2s, and mostly, obviously EVM based. And I feel like everyone chases sort of what I call the DeFi starter kit, AMMs, loans, basically like the base pack of what's successful on Ethereum. And I think what I sort of saw with Pump.Fun, and I feel like there was a couple others. I think Hyperliquid sort of did this, where I'm starting to realize I think it's just like viral applications that make the chain versus the chain being able to, just exist out there. And so it's good that you're thinking, I think, from, what are some novel applications that could do well versus let's do everything. Because the let's do everything approach is the uphill battle, right? You're fighting everyone for liquidity. Everyone's playing the same game, et cetera. So
Yeah.
I love that you guys are thinking like that.
100%. One ecosystem that I think are doing, really well with that is the Mega ETH crew. Like the way that they've been able to curate a nice group of apps that are, optimizing and indexing for use cases, not just like you said, the starter kit. If you look at other ecosystems, and I won't mention any names, but you see the same copy pasted apps. Some of them were built by the actual team itself because they couldn't even attract, outside builders to come build them. So like you said, with the ecosystems that are doing the best, you have Base, they had Fren Tech, Blast for the short amount of time that they were relevant, had Fantasy Top. Like you need to have that viral app that really draws people in and keeps them sticky to the ecosystem. And most importantly, things are denominated in the native currency. That's what really, creates value for your stakers, for your validators and your investors, so that, we can create some utility for your token. There has to be a reason for it. I think there's far too many of these, sequencer L2s that there's really no usefulness or utility to their token. There's no value accrual mechanism. There's no unique validator set. So we're really optimizing for the big, monolithic ecosystem and everything that we need to accomplish that. One of those things is going to be a viral app. So hopefully we can have more to share on that next time we talk.
Do you have any dream applications you'd like to see on Arch Network?
I mean, we talk about this a lot, because obviously it's a need, right? We just established that. So there is one particular app we're really excited about. We're probably going to keep it a little close to vest because I think that it's not exactly something that is not able to be replicated. But that being said, needing a performant type of ecosystem or VM is 100% required, which plays to our advantage. But this certainly could be done on like a ecosystem like Solana. So we don't want to divulge too much.
One thing that we can share though, we haven't like seen any actual price discovery for like any of these Bitcoin assets. Like they're traded on like clunky order books. You need to wait like 10 minutes for the price to even update on the order book. Just like making an efficient order book at like light speed is I think is like something that's never been done. I'm really interested in Bitcoin.
Hey, Mason, I don't know how much you trade runes or anything in the Bitcoin space, but it's been hard for the runes trenchers out there. But I think there's a good community, there's a good foundation and desire for people to want Bitcoin fungibles and Bitcoin NFTs, which are called ordinals. So creating more of an efficient marketplace for these assets is going to be something that is going to be exciting to watch happen, because you have a lot of people who are like, runes are dead, they're never coming back, simply because they've gotten used to this inefficient market where the liquidity profile is not good, and also it's a very slow user experience. Your transactions sometimes don't go through, or they get RBS by somebody else. You don't know what happened. All of this stuff is user friction that we need to get rid of, and ultimately, like Amine said, it's going to lead to better price discovery. But there's no reason why the top meme coins on Bitcoin don't have similar market caps as some of the top meme coins on Ethereum and Solana.
Interesting. Do you run into any sort of throughput limitations the way you've designed the architecture?
No, this is why we have our own consensus, right? Because we're not really like, we do submit Bitcoin transactions. There's obviously a limit on like how much Bitcoin transactions you can include in a block, although we don't wait for like their confirmation. So we also offer like another type of transactions. We call them state-only transactions. So they're not sending any Bitcoin transactions to the network, just doing the state transitions on Arch. And this also like allows the ability for developers to like mix and match between these type of transactions. So you can basically like choose how close you want to be on Bitcoin or how far you want to be on Bitcoin. You can choose like how frequently your app submits state back to Bitcoin.
And what are some of the core principles that you guys use to sort of guide the development and direction of Arch Network?
Yeah, so like our North Star and the primary objectives, I would say, for Arch is obviously number one is unlocking programmability on Bitcoin to enable, a Bitcoin native DeFi ecosystem. That's obviously like, first order. But one of the other things that we, really tried to optimize for was to remain aligned with the Bitcoin security and economic model. So Arch is designed to reinforce Bitcoin's long-term sustainability, not extract from it. And how we're ultimately able to achieve this is because every single time Arch is settling a transaction on the Bitcoin L1, which is very, very frequent, as we mentioned in the Saturn application, we're settling many, many different state transitions on Bitcoin, and doing it so much so that we're going to be creating ongoing block space demand, helping support miner revenue, which scales the security budget of Bitcoin. So this creates not just a better situation for Bitcoin, because as we're scaling the security budget of Bitcoin, it becomes more valuable over time.
We want people to basically have the best user experience on Arch. We want Arch to feel like Solana on Bitcoin and not have to like compromise in terms of user experience. So no waiting for like Bitcoin confirmations, like not using this like clunky wallets that and switching wallets from like for example in like EVM land, you need to like first use your Bitcoin wallet, bridge to the L2, then switch to this like EVM wallet, use MetaMask, and that just feels like clunky.
I was going to say, yeah, you're kind of bringing a Solana user experience to the Bitcoin world.
For sure.
Which is super much needed.
Yeah, I think if you look at like the difference right now in the Ethereum landscape and Solana, it's like over the last 9 years, the Ethereum ecosystem optimized for security and trust assumptions and modularity, which ultimately created more fragmentation and this identity crisis, didn't optimize for use cases and apps. Meanwhile, Solana, which many can argue is much more centralized and much less, secure in terms of ZK validation and stuff like on Ethereum, they've taken a much more reasonable approach and scaled their ecosystem to what it is today. And I don't think anybody is going to argue who's winning right now. I think that's 100% going to be the Solana ecosystem due to all the on-chain activity, all of the net asset value that's being created inside of that ecosystem. And that's a function of the sticky developer community that they've been able to foster over the last 4 or 5 years, and the lack of friction and better user experience that users, liquidity providers, validators, they all have. That's why Solana is winning. And that's what we're trying to replicate on Bitcoin, as opposed to being the most trustless thing available. If you're looking for the most, like ZK compressed, trustless, way to do a Bitcoin L2, that's not going to be where we come in. We come in because there's a tremendous amount of or a less amount of friction and a much more composable ecosystem because it's much more developer friendly and user friendly.
And this is also why we like made some design considerations to keep the chain monolithic with Bitcoin. Like we see Arch as like an execution layer for Bitcoin, not really like creating this separation between Arch and Bitcoin. So I think there is tremendous value in just like keeping everything monolithic. I think where L2s get it wrong, like people keep saying that like every successful app will eventually like create their own chain. But I think and that's basically like owning the whole stack. But if you go look at Solana land, like they like app developers really do own the chain as well. Like the top validators are apps, either like RPC providers or like very successful apps. So like Panfan runs their own validator. Uh, Tensor with and like Vector now, they run their own validator. Uh, Drift runs their own validator, so they really own the app, and they also like they really own the chain, and they also like are doing some like modifications to the client to make their app better in terms of like block inclusion or like driving MEV back to their users. And when you compose all the work from all these people into one chain, I think that is the power of open source, and that is the power of decentralization.
Let's say a developer wanted to migrate from Solana to Arch Network. What would that journey look like?
I think it's really easy. So we've tried to keep like the interfaces and the APIs pretty much the same. There's obviously like some new syscalls for like getting data into the VM from Bitcoin and like signing the transactions. There is a different like account infrastructure for since we include the UTXO in there. But if you've written your contracts in ROS, I think it's pretty easy. Like pretty easy transition. We're also like working on an anchor type of thing for Arch to make it easy as well, even for people who've written their contracts in Anchor, since it's most used in Solana land.
So is it possible to, take an application that's already running on Solana and copy paste it onto Arch, or is it a little bit more involved than that?
Yeah, it's more involved. You need to basically like change the APIs. Yeah, if you want to do something with Bitcoin, obviously you need to like use those syscalls, construct the transactions. But aside from that, like the data structures, like the functions are pretty much gonna stay the same.
What are some of the biggest technical challenges you ran into trying to get this all deployed on testnet?
I think so. First of all, like there is no really good indexing software on Bitcoin. Like pretty much everyone just is using like a Bitcoin node, and maybe some people are using a mempool node. And most of the stuff that's out there right now is not like good enough or fast enough. So we basically like re-implemented uh, the whole mempool node into like our own indexing software that like basically tracks transactions as the moment they get into the mempool with really low latency. And also like just if you don't sync the state transitions that are happening on Arch and the UTXO transfers that are happening on Bitcoin really fast with really low latency, you get this problem where the programs are getting like false data into them. So the resulting transactions that you're gonna submit to Bitcoin are not gonna go through. Just like bringing that latency down to as close to zero as possible was a big challenge. We do have like a really cool way to fix it. We're using like directed acyclic graphs to basically map out the relationships between our transactions and Bitcoin transactions and keep that stay synced at all times. And most of this work has been done in collaboration with the Saturn teams, especially Marcus. And this is like goes back to like owning the chain discussion that we just had. I feel like having like people who really care about the tech and see how they can leverage it and also like contribute to the ecosystem is a really big part of any ecosystem in crypto.
One thing I'll kind of echo from his first point. Now, I won't try to dive into the rollback mechanism that you just tried to explain because it's way over my head personally. But one thing I will say is like the infrastructure side of things cannot be understated. Meaning like oracles, RPC endpoints, indexers. Ethereum was created in 2017, but it wasn't. DeFi summer didn't happen until 2020. So what happened in those 3 years when nothing was really happening on Ethereum, or that we didn't really have DeFi summer quite yet? Ethereum was at maybe $40 and then went to $4,000. So what happened to get that 100x? It's the emergence of these infrastructure providers like Alchemy, Infra, Chainlink, Layer Zero. These are essential pieces of infrastructure to enhance the developer experience, to make it easier to create the applications that you know and love today on Ethereum. Right. But what does also Ethereum have that Bitcoin doesn't have? A foundation. The Ethereum Foundation paid for a lot of that infrastructure to come into existence and support the developer community. So the Bitcoin ecosystem doesn't have its own foundation. So we have to basically like do all of this work from scratch. And the outside infrastructure providers that we're not even responsible for, like those Alchemies and Infuras that make the developer experience so much easier. We need those companies to come about, because Chainlink and Layer Zero and these EVM aligned infrastructure providers, they're not looking at Bitcoin right now. They're just saying, what other alt EVM chain can we support? So we're working with a company called Maestro, who came from the Cardano ecosystem. They were doing some more developer tooling and indexing over in the Cardano ecosystem, which, as you know, is a UTXO chain. So they have a little bit of better understanding of how UTXOs work. And we've been doing a lot of work with the Maestro team on getting them up to speed on the indexing and RPC providing type of infrastructure that is necessary for developers to tap into. So all this stuff just takes time. We're in year maybe 2 of the Bitcoin design space opening up. So I think that we're making a lot of progress as a community and ecosystem of builders trying to get there faster. But it certainly is coming a lot quicker. It's not going to take 5 years like it did Ethereum, that's for sure.
It's funny, the way you're describing the Bitcoin development landscape, it feels like the first 6 months of Ethereum, where like if I wanted to build anything, I would have to take the libraries that were out there,
exactly,
and rebuild them.
Yep.
Because they didn't quite do what you needed them to do, and they didn't always work. And so you just had to have your own version of everything.
Yep, exactly.
And how did you guys meet?
So we actually met in the Bitcoin Startup Lab. Albert's the creator.
Albert.
Yeah, he thought that we'd be a good match. I think that he was absolutely right. Like, we really appreciated each other's focus and gritty nature, and hustle mentality. Like, there are other guys that had lots of different ideas. When I met him, he was laser focused on this one idea. And myself, I come from an entrepreneurial background with a few different exits under my belt. So I have a little bit of experience in the 0 to 1 building of a business that maybe Amine didn't have. But I really liked his hustle and his grit and his focus. And despite my best efforts to convince him to build some other small-minded idea, when I went to the Bitcoin Startup Lab with, he was like, no, this is the big idea. We need to do this one. And eventually I caved and I gave in, and I'm silly for even trying, because this was the right move from the very get-go.
Sounds like a really good pairing. It's sometimes the best vision happens when you go like low level. There's like, some founders start top, outside in, some founders inside out, and it's just good to have that balance, because you kind of need both. Maybe in the crypto space, the inside out sort of provides the fundamental, and then you have to figure out how to like bring it to the world in the biggest package possible. So like innovations like NFTs or ICOs, even just an ERC20 minting capability. It's like all these things came about, and then someone had to scale it out there, bring it to a real world application, and get a lot of users into it. So it's good to have that balance.
That's right. And also like not having limiting beliefs. Right? Like, if you come into something with all this technical baggage because you've learned something one way, and you obviously come in with all of those preconceived notions that can be quite limiting. And creating something that's unique in a design perspective, right? So I think it's really refreshing watching Amine talk to other really accomplished developers because they're talking about what is possible instead of what's not possible. You talk to other developers that are kind of like stuck in their way of thinking, whether they're Bitcoin developers, EVM developers, doesn't matter. They all have their own little preconceived notions, whether it's about miners or modularity or whatever. But having like an open mind to say like, how do we make this possible? Not just say that it's not. And that's like how Amine's mind works. So it's really refreshing.
Yeah, you can just do things, really.
You can just build things. Amazing. And so, yeah, what are the main milestones and sort of like roadmap items moving forward? It sounds like mainnet is probably going to be one of them. But what are some other major milestones you guys are tracking against?
So we just closed our Series A, which you'll probably see in the media in a couple weeks. We've got a nice Fortune article and a few other PR announcements that we've been kind of holding back to try to make a bigger splash ahead of Token 2049. So stay tuned for that. Our lead investor in that round was Pantera. We can share that now. So I'm really excited to have them as partners. In terms of roadmap, like obviously mainnet is top of mind for us right now, which ironically means all aspects of the business are relevant, from branding, TVL conversations, validator conversations, more bug testing, auditing. Everything is relevant right now, which means that we're crazy busy. But planning a lot of IRL events to really get face to face. A lot of our teams that are building. So we've got some stuff going on in Dubai, in Vegas as well for the Bitcoin conference later in May. And right now it's going to be fun because we're really looking forward to getting, working with the teams and watching the team start to collaborate with each other, because like the Aave and the DEX, they obviously got to work together because, that's the composability is one of our main selling points. So being able to leverage this cross composability and cross program invocation is really something that we need this face-to-face interactions with. Saturn got so far ahead because their lead dev flew out to Morocco and worked with Amine. That's where Amine lives, by the way, in Morocco. Hand in hand, they worked together for like 2 straight weeks to get their program right because they saw the tech. They wanted to be the first to market with it. And to a certain degree, that's what it required. Over time, it's not always going to require trying to see and work with Amine because we're going to have more DevRel support, more open source guides and tutorials and office hours and things like that. But for the devs that really want to channel the technology and what it offers, it requires a little bit of diving in.
What's the best way for developers and contributors to get involved in building on Arch?
I think get started with like an Arch bug. We have a bug that basically goes through every how to set up like your local validator, set up a Bitcoin node, like the indexer, the indexing software, and we have a couple of guides for like some example programs. You can get started, and they go through and explain like what each function code does. And you can basically just like go through the material there and get started.
How'd you come up with the name Arch?
It's a good question, fair question. There really was no rhyme or reason to it. We were getting to the point where we needed to settle on something because we were getting investors who were like, okay, we're ready to invest, and we still hadn't picked a name yet. They just like the tech and the design. But like being in crypto, I've obviously noticed that most protocols are at least like layer 1 chains or some like very abstract 1 or 2 syllable name. So like we kind of came up with a few options. We started to like think, well, we're not bridging at all, but maybe we're like sort of this, bridge to Bitcoin in a way. So like we're not a bridge, but we're an archway to Bitcoin. It was just like it kind of just evolved over time. The Arch logo is 4 parallel lines that are kind of bent into an arch. So just some like branding stuff there, but nothing really.
I like it. It's simple and it's not cheesy.
Yeah, we're trying to go for like simple and minimalistic and abstract. Yeah, that was kind of the thing. But yeah, it's you can play the what if game. And what if we did whatever other brands we plan on all the time? But you gotta kind of move forward.
What's one takeaway you'd like the listeners to leave with?
One takeaway is pretty soon, probably in June, you'll be able to experience the first ever fast AMM on Bitcoin on Saturn. So being able to experience trading fungibles as well as basis trading your Bitcoins in and out of stables, I think is going to be a really powerful thing. And real yield on Bitcoin is coming. I'm not talking about points farming of inflationary emissions and playing this whole like game of musical chairs on Ethereum. This is actual real yield that you're going to be able to get from borrowers, from perps traders, from people that are trying to take advantage of some of these more asset-backed leverage and margin trading opportunities. That all equates to real DeFi yield, not something that needs to be subsidized with points. And unfortunately, I think the industry has become too infatuated with these points. We need to actually get back to real sustainable forms of yield, and that's what we're focused on right now. So you'll be seeing lots of opportunities for that here pretty soon.
And for builders, I would say like focus on developer experience, focus on user experience, and focus on developer experience. But yeah, user experience is all what matters. People need to feel good when using your apps, or they're not going to use them.
By the way, I'm not talking about like 1%, 2%, 3% yield like you're seeing in some of these more comparable protocols like Babylon. I'm talking about double-digit yields.
Wow. Where does it come from?
The protocols, LPing indexes, LPing in perps dexes like you see on some of these more borrow rate perps.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess this wasn't possible before, but with what you're building, it opens the door to economics that actually work.
Exactly. Yeah. In order to buy back stables to pay back your loans, you need to shake and move between Bitcoin and stables, and that's what actually is going to create the demand and therefore the yield. If you go to Ethereum, there is no demand for Bitcoin other than just something to borrow against.
And where should listeners go to learn more about Arch Network?
So we have two profiles on Twitter. We have @Arch, ARCH. That's our main that we just acquired, and then our
congratulations!
Arch, thank you. And then Arch Network, ARCH_NTWRK would be the. There is no underscore. It's just Arch NTWRK. Yeah. Those two are our main accounts.
What's the website?
Arch.network.
Arch.network.
Yeah, white paper and docs can all be found there. The Arch book that Amine was referencing for developer docs and tutorials, that's all there as well. Validator, sign up forms as well. If you're interested in running a node, we'll be opening that up to the public at some point this year. That's something that we didn't cover is we've got a pretty stellar group of validators in our Genesis set ranging from, Galaxy Kiln, Luga nodes, Blockdaemon, Chorus One, Juicy Steak, Edgevana. We've got a good group of about almost 30 really good commercial validators that are all very trustworthy and credible. And then, of course, we'll be open sourcing, the nodes and making it permissionless eventually this year.
Incredible. That's you got a lot of good names behind this. I think you guys are gonna, do pretty well. Thank you so much for joining us today, Matt and Amine. It was a pleasure learning more about Arch Network. To learn more, check out arch.network and follow along. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.